Yep. Hi, everyone. As you know, I'm Emily. I'm representing the Student Psychology Association as the president of the club of UB. So I'm going to be speaking about harassment and boundaries with respect to the impact of it on mental health, right? So I'm briefly going to go into it because I feel like all my colleagues before spoke about it in different ways, but I have a different perspective to share, okay? So as you know, sexual harassment is any form of sexual behavior that is offensive or humiliating or even intimidating to persons, right? And this can happen on the streets and it can happen in intimate relationships, right? So publicly and privately. And studies have shown that this harassment has increased the risk of persons experiencing anxiety, like social anxiety. And this stems from persons like having instilled fear, especially women, right? Like when you're going down, walking on the streets, like one of the colleagues said before me, the soothing and all these dialogues that they put towards us. It's really uncalled for and it is not okay, right? That is not right. And these things can cause persons to go into depression, right? And then some persons might even go through PTSD, which is also known as post-traumatic stress disorder, where it prolongs their stresses. So you have this fear going out into public. You have this fear of um, doing your daily activities, and you can't really function without feeling scared, right? And that affects your mental health, right? And then some persons might even have low self-esteem, right? And this can cause their how to put it, their mental and psychological or psychosocial well-being to diminish, right? And all this together affects a person's psychological well-being, right? Sexual harassment is not okay, right? And I want to touch on boundaries. So boundaries is crucially important when it comes to relationships, right? It is so important to set boundaries because if you don't do that, people would just take advantage of you, right? And you don't want to be what is called a people pleaser, right? You want to show people that okay, you have to have respect when I say no, and it doesn't mean that you just have you want to take over what I am saying or like do as you please, right? And if you don't set boundaries, this would damage your psychological well-being as well, right? Now, so I have some tips and solutions to this, right? So I mean, there are many different ways to set boundaries, but these are some 5 main tips that you can try. You need to communicate your thoughts with your partner. So when you do this, your partner would understand if you say no, I'm not in the mood, and your partner have to have that respect, right? That okay, I'm not in the mood to have intercourse or any sexual activity or what have you, right? It means no, and that is you setting your boundary, right? And then another thing that is very important is to never assume or guess, right? I believe Scott was speaking about this earlier, right? Never assume your partner's feelings, right? And just think, okay, she probably want that because she had a long day or vice versa. No, you have to ask permission, right? And I'll get to that point where we was talking about consent and reiterate those points. The third thing is to follow through with what you say. So don't just say, okay, I respect your boundaries. I wouldn't do that, but then you come and you physically or sexually assault me. That is not right, right? And again, it comes down to having respect and boundaries for your partner in a relationship. And imagine if you're in an intimate relationship and you don't set those boundaries, these same people in an intimate relationship, how they can react to persons in public space. You understand? Right? So these are some things that you have to follow through. And also take responsibility for your actions. So you have to also own up to when you do something wrong and don't, lash out and and it gets violent, like one of my colleagues was saying, where you're trying to victim blame, right? These things can have a very, very um a very harsh impact on someone's psychological well-being, right? And then last but not least, know when it's time to move on from a toxic, unhealthy relationship. I know that's very hard, because imagine like it have persons that are married and they have kids, right? And they are in a toxic relationship that can affect the family life, and it can affect how the kids, um when they're growing up, they will have a kind of dysfunction in the family and whatnot. But sometimes it is always better if the partners go separate ways, because two people having this no respect for one another, and their boundaries, again, it comes back to that, can have a very, very bad impact on their psychological well-being, and it could lead to depression and everything that I explained, just like with harassment, PTSD and anxiety and all these things that will develop, and then it would turn into the person living with a lifetime disorder, right? And last but not least, I want to talk about oh, sorry, I forgot one of my points. So it is also very important, and I cannot emphasize this more, about sexual activity. You must give consent if you want to do that, and no means no, right? It is an agreement between both parties. It's not a one-way street. It is two people that, or two or more, depending on whatever relationship you have, when you are considering doing this activity, right? And this can change a person's life forever, right? With respect to their mental health, like many survivors that, if they were ever sexually assaulted or if they were raped, they would have probably have like flashbacks, and they would go through shame and guilt, and they would feel isolated, and all these feelings, right, of confusion and fear. All these things, it affects your mind, right? And that is not healthy, and it's not okay for anybody to go through. But we have survivors that studies have shown that this is what the impacts of persons that go through these things on a daily basis, right? And all this leads to some of the victims being susceptible to psychological issues, right? Just like I said, depression and PTSD, these are the very common, prevalent mental health problems that we face, right? If you are a victim of rape or sexual assault or any sexual harassment, right? And they can go from having very mild depression to very severe depression, and sometimes it leads to substance abuse and eating disorders or sleeping disorders and insomnia and all these different things, right, that affects your mind. You would not be at peace, right? So before I close, I know I'm on a tight schedule, and I believe all my colleagues touched on all the points that I wanted to talk about as well. And my point was to just raise awareness with how it impacts your mental health. I want ladies to learn to say no. Don't be afraid to speak up, right? And especially if there are you're in a situation that you cannot get out of like right away, try somehow to reach out. There are so many services available. I know some of them might be hard to get because of the price and whatnot, but there are free social services that you can call and talk to somebody, let them know we are here, we want to listen, right? About whether you're young, you're old, it is important to speak up and reach out, especially when you are saying no and it is not being reciprocated to the partner that you are with. That is really not healthy for you, right? And men, be respectful to your partners, right? And let us try to build a better place for our children so that we could all live in harmony, right? Because if we don't set the examples as the adults, what do you expect for the children, right? And the cycle will always continue, right? And we need to continue to raise awareness like this, And yeah, that's all I have for now. I carry it back to you.